Hello, BookTube. I was rearranging my so-called work bookshelves last night and this morning. That's the bookshelf where I keep all of the new and forthcoming books, and I organize them by month and just load them up as the month goes on. And then when we approach the end of a month, I move everything up because the top shelf on that bookcase is the current month. And March has only a couple of days left. So March is all but over, and that means that top shelf has to go to April. I have to sort out the remainder of the March books, bring all the April books up, and then sort them out. Do I have the advanced copy and a finished copy? Well, I don't need both. I want to make sure that from left to right, the books are progressing in time of release so that I'm not reviewing a book from the 27th of April on the 1st of April. All that sort of stuff has to happen. I've finally mostly done that. It was a little bit melancholy. I like to do that with my friend Sam, and he was not able to make it this time around, so I did it by myself. And that automatically made me think about April, and I was helped in that regard by a bunch of booktubers who are making April reading plan videos, TBRs, that sort of thing. I, of course, have a remit already carved in stone for myself for April, which is to read or reread all of the major new releases and from all of the major publishers on all of the 15 or 16 genres that interest me. It's a huge amount, more than I can do in April, more than I can do in any month. But I'll go at it with a vengeance. I'll give it the old school try. And when I saw a lot of those BookTube videos, and I'm sure there'll be more of them by the time this video goes up, I thought about the videos like that I could make myself. We should look over the month of April. Not only in terms of my own TBR, but in terms of forthcoming books. My TBR, my reading in April will involve a lot of rereading. It will involve a lot of reading a backlist, even if it isn't rereading. And that will be largely spurred by BookTube events of one kind or another. But there's still the new release market, which is where I do a lot of my reading. It's where I live, where I have my being. So I thought I'd go over a few books that are going to come out in April that I haven't read yet, just in case they interest you more than they do me, in case they interest you just at all. You maybe want to get them from pre-order them at Amazon for your Kindle, or find out whether or not your bookstore is getting them, or pre-order them at your library or whatnot. And the first one is by Penn and Kim Holderness. To say the least, it gives me pause. It's called ADHD is Awesome. And it is going to do a low-key, other end of the spectrum version of what we saw that book Sociopath do, which is to normalize an abnormality. Of course, when it comes to sociopathy, the abnormality can be genuinely dangerous and should not, under any circumstance, be normalized. But this isn't the same as that, of course, but ADHD isn't going to functionally be that much different if you try to normalize it. And more importantly, I would think, I don't know, I haven't read this book, but I would think that it's more concerned not with normalizing ADHD, but with villainizing people who refuse to normalize ADHD. And if you normalize ADHD, and so you can be a heart surgeon while proudly, marching in the ADHD parade on the weekends, well, are you going to want that surgeon operating on you, or more importantly, on your kid? I don't think so. Any more than you're going to want a sociopath doing that. I am against this vengeful, fascistic urge to force people to normalize that which is not normal. I'm against that. I'm not advocating intolerance to people who have afflictions, but that doesn't mean there's no such thing as an affliction. There are such things to the limited extent that ADHD actually exists. I have done a huge amount of reading on this subject. I have never seen anything that convinced me that, neurologically speaking, this condition exists. But if it does, to the limited extent that it does, it should be studied and countered and treated, not just accepted as this is awesome. It's a defect. It's an affliction. It's a shortcoming. If you can't concentrate, you are at a disadvantage in society and in any kind of chosen profession. We'll see. The title could be misleading here. The authors could easily just be doing a thoughtful examination. We will see. I will read it and report back. We have something that I don't need to agonize over because it's mindless fun. This is J.R. Ward. This is The Beloved, the new volume in her Black Dagger Brotherhood series, a series of romance novels about super sexy, supernatural himbos. I've been reading the Black Dagger Brotherhood pretty much from the beginning. I think I missed the first two books. Then I read the third one and went back and read the first two, and I've just been capping up since then. I don't know how many books. Every once in a while, just to keep my hand in, I review a Black Dagger Brotherhood book. And every time I do, I have to check and see how many dozens and dozens of books are in this series. It's good, mindless fun. And also very good at something that I talk about on this channel, which is how well does a book so late in a series invite new readers. J.R. Ward does, and she's unsung on the subject, but she does a wonderful job at that. Just wonderful. The books come with a glossary. They come with some potted explanations, but the characters are really the ones that bear the burden of that, and it's all done fairly naturally. So it'll be great fun to do. I'm not meaning to make it sound more serious than it is. Then this next one is I would judge from the title, the subtitle, and the cover that it is another example of trying to normalize something that should not be normalized. I know we live in the age of normalize this and normalize that, but that's mainly done for power. The power of the person saying that. They're not saying, I want greater acceptance for sociopaths. They're saying, I want the ability to hurt you under the cloak of righteousness if you deny that, if you don't do what I say. I want the ability under the cloak of righteousness, under the guise of the moral high ground, to hurt you. Not because I think you need hurting, but because I get off on hurting people. That's the power that I want. And all I'm doing is picking utterly outrageous claims in order to get you to object so that I can exercise that power. I want that thrill. I don't care about the person that I'm allegedly defending or the group that I'm allegedly defending. I hate that. I absolutely hate that. This isn't quite the same thing, and the book, again, could take a completely different approach. This is by Ethan Mollick, and it's called Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI as a kind of partnership. And you can't do that. AI is a tool. If it's not a tool, if we say we're going to work with it, then we're doomed as a species. So I'm not sure that I don't know what the book is. But if it follows through on the promise of its title and subtitle, then I'm going to disagree with the author quite a bit. This is not a question of two sovereign nations getting along with each other at all. This next one, I don't quite know why this has come up on my radar for April. Maybe it's a new release of the paperback, maybe with a new introduction or a new foreword of some kind. But it's a terrific book, so I thought I would put it on this list for today. We'll do plenty of lists like this for April books. But I thought I'd put it on here because it's terrific. It's well worth your time, and its subject may be at the heart of all of this normalization crap. This is by Tom Nichols, and it's called The Death of Expertise. And it's all about the fact that observable reality, actually becoming an expert on something by studying it and understanding it, has fallen into ill repute in the 21st century. Now, the last thing that most ideologues want to do is consult an expert on the things that they wholeheartedly believe. The last thing they want to do is consult an expert because the expert will tell them they're wrong, and they don't want to hear that. And we, like I've mentioned before on this channel, we live in an age where you can choose your own reality, build it carefully to your own specifications, and then move in and live there. Thanks to these devices, thanks to this device, you can live in your own reality. And if you can do that, you feel more emboldened than ever to boot experts out the door. An expert will tell you that the earth is not flat. An expert will tell you that Christianity is one religion among tens of thousands. That happens to have a lot of adherents today, but is no more provable than any of the others. An expert will tell you that the Earth's climate is catastrophically warming and that the long-term implications are devastating. Experts will tell you all sorts of things that you don't really want to hear. And hence, in this book, Nichols isn't really saying that there aren't any more experts. I think what he's mainly trying to say in this book is that they aren't regarded the same way that they ever have been. And it's all really well done. I was turned on to this book by Zach at the Brattle. He recommended it to me, and it was a good recommendation. I'd missed it completely. It was a good recommendation, and I recommend it to you. I don't know if its presence on the April radar means that there's a new edition or something, but your library should have it, either way. Then next we have a book from a scholarly press. I think this is Oxford. It's on a subject that I really am interested in, and it's by a scholar that I really like. So you would think I'd have no reservations about it. I have only one, and it's a small one. This is Forbidden Desire in Early Modern Europe by Noel Malcolm, and it's about homosexual relationships at a time in countries over decades, over centuries, when they were largely impossible, or needed to be heavily encoded, or were only for certain aspects of society and not others. We have almost no documentation that would allow us to examine what, for instance, an 18-year-old miller's son, illiterate except for his mark, we have very little documentation to tell us what he would do in 1570 if he reached 18 and knew that he was sexually attracted to other men and knew what would happen to him if anyone ever learned that. That boy, that man, that young man would not have written anything. He would have found a way to live, and we don't know what that way would have been. In many cases, we don't. We have to go to the higher levels of society in order to get any kind of documentation. Malcolm is a scholar who can definitely do that. So this book could, in large part, be terrific. I'm sure that it will be. I'm sure that it will be interesting, thought-provoking, serious. The only reservation that I have is academic fascist speak, which I hate. And I admit, I hate it so much that in the 21st century I've become really touchy to it, probably overly touchy, so that I see it where it is not. And I think you know the kind of thing I'm talking about, where usually generating from academia, there will be some usage change. And it is not suggested. It is mandatory. And it seems trivial, but you will lose your tenure if you don't do it. You'll be outcast from any kind of society that you've ever wanted to join. You will never have a career in the profession that you desire if you don't do that trivial little thing. And those of you who study the history of fascism will know that that is all important to fascism. That's exactly how they do it. They don't march into your home and say, set your children on fire. Instead, they send you a little note saying, it's a tiny little change. Is it really that important to you? All we want you to do is change it. We know that it doesn't make any sense. We know that you know that it doesn't make any sense. We just want you to do it because we want you to. Surely it's not that important, is it? Those of you who work in American retail will recognize this gambit from your fascist managers, who will use a phrase that fascists love to use. This isn't really the hill to die on, is it? I once had a middle manager actually say that to me in a meeting. This isn't a hill to die on, is it? And I gave her an immediate response that I don't think anyone had ever told her before. I don't think anyone had ever said it to her, judging by how shocked she looked. I looked at her when she said, this isn't a hill to die on, is it? I looked at her and said, are you planning on killing me? Which puts the onus where it belongs. The person who uses that phrase is a fascist. And I admit, as you could tell from this little diatribe, I get a little touchy on the subject. I don't like unhoused instead of homeless. I don't like the fact that I can read a 700-page biography of the famous slave poet Phyllis Wheatley and have her never once referred to as a slave. I don't like any of that. And I wonder if that's what I'm seeing here. Why is that not homosexual? Or homosexuality? Male-male sexual relationships, there's a word for that. It's called homosexuality. Why is it not that word? It could be nothing. It could be absolutely trivial. It could be just cover design or the author's own whim. That strikes me as academic fascist speak. And we'll just have to see. I haven't read the book. We'll have to see if it's all throughout. Am I going to read a book about European homosexuality in the late Middle Ages that never uses the word homosexual or homosexuality? Is that what's going to happen? We shall see. Then this next one is an approach to history that I don't usually like. This is by Dave Gibbons, and it's called A History of the World in 12 Shipwrecks. And the reason I don't like this is because you can't do it. You can't tell a history of the world in the column Mauve or in 12 fruits or whatever. You can't tell a history of the world that way. You can give little depth charges to the history of the world, but you can't do the thing itself in this kind of a gimmicky way. 12 shipwrecks are not going to tell a history of the world. No 12 shipwrecks are. No 1,200 shipwrecks are going to tell a history of the world. But usually when I read books like this, the pomegranate book, the art object book, whatever, the thing I do get is great granular studies of the individual things that are being considered. In this case, 12 shipwrecks. And if I remember correctly from the table of contents, some of the shipwrecks here are not well known to me. So I'm bound to learn a lot from this book, even though I'm hoping that in so many cases, I'm hoping that the author just abandons this whole gimmick of I'm telling the history of the world. I'm hoping that he does. Then this next one, nonfiction from a famous novelist, and probably startling. This is Knife by Salman Rushdie. And this is a nonfiction account of him being attacked and almost murdered on stage at an author event. And I have high hopes for this. I have high hopes for Rushdie anyway. He's one of the rare examples that I can come up with in modern letters where I get the strong sense that the author is growing into his talent and getting better in some ways as he goes along. But also, the last time that Salman Rushdie wrote a work of nonfiction about real life, about his real life, was his book Joseph Anton, which I thought was terrific. So it'll be tough to read about this, but it will probably be terrific, I would think. I have hopes for it anyway. Then this next one is a big omnibus edition that gives me hope that the comic book world is listening to myself and Michael K. Vaughan every Wednesday, because in addition to disagreeing with each other about every comic book under the sun, we also agree on a lot of the things that we're not seeing that we wish we were. And somebody, Marvel, has finally come forward with an omnibus of the Micronauts, which is, some of you who are old enough to remember the toy line of the Micronauts are going to think, what, they did a tie-in comic for the Micronauts toys? And you want a $100 omnibus volume of it? And my answer to those questions is yes. Yes, they did a tie-in comic. And yes, I do want the omnibus edition because, believe it or not, the omnibus edition, the Marvel Comics Micronauts comic book was really good. It was really, really good. So was their Atari Force book. But we'll leave that. I'll never get that. But Micronauts was really, really good. It had good artwork. Believe it or not, there was a large amount of science fiction world building behind those little plastic toys. And in addition to a first issue cover by Dave Cockrum, who becomes famous for the X-Men, it has artwork by Michael Golden. If you're not in the comic books world, you're not going to have any idea the significance of that. But there isn't a single person in the comic books world who won't immediately stop and raise an eyebrow at that, because Michael Golden is one of the greatest comic book artists of all time. And he's the one who did Micronauts. This is a ton, issue after issue after issue of his work. It's terrific. I don't know if this omnibus edition will reprint the letters columns. I'll be very interested to see if this reprints the letters columns. But I'm very grateful for the thing. I don't know that I'm so grateful that I'm going to indulge in a 100-pound hardcover. I don't. Every time I ever indulge in that, I always regret it. It's great that it exists, but what I really want is an epic collection of this. I want a paperback collection that I can actually read in bed. Then this next one is a reprint of a novel that it once upon a time had ardent partisans. I don't know that it does anymore. I love it. It's called Miss Macintosh, My Darling by Marguerite Young. And it's being reissued in a big, stylish trade paperback in April. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head the last time that this was reissued. It bothers me that there's no Penguin Classic when there are Penguin Classics, to put it mildly, of less deserving works. This is a big, very fun, very subtly subversive novel. I strongly recommend it, and I'm overjoyed to see it get at least a stab at a new audience. I'll see if I can get a print copy. I don't have a print copy right now. I'll see if I can get a print copy and maybe even work up a review. Although that's not typically what I do. I do typically review books, but I don't typically review literary reprints. I'm strongly considering it now for a new Mariner literary reprint of the USA trilogy by John Dos Passos, but I might do it for Miss Macintosh, My Darling as well. It certainly deserves it. Then we have a book by a guy named John Zimrak, Z-M-I-R-A-K. Don't know this author. The book came on my radar, and I will read it. I will not like it. I know that I will not like it. I know that it will make me angry. It's called No Second Amendment, No First. In other words, the title is a threat. The title is an explicit threat. If you don't let me have a basement full of guns, I'll kill you. How's your First Amendment then? I'll kill you if you don't do that. So that's a tip-off to me that I'm not going to like this book or any of the so-called reasoning behind it. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees you the right to free speech. And the Second Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees you the right to maintain a gun if you are part of a well-regulated state militia. And if you have a basement full of guns, or even one gun in your house, I can unconditionally guarantee you are not a member of a well-regulated state militia. And so you do not have a constitutionally guaranteed right to have those guns. And I wouldn't press the point. I wouldn't care at all. If the whole country were like Vermont, I wouldn't care at all. If it was all responsible people, if we didn't have 1,400 mass shooting events every year in this country, if we didn't have 700 million guns in this country, then I wouldn't care so much. If somehow that unbelievable superabundance of guns, including extremely powerful weapons of war that exist for no reason other than to shred the victim to such a point that you need DNA to even tell whether they're male or female. If it weren't at that point in the United States, then maybe I wouldn't care. Maybe I wouldn't press the point. But it is at that point, and it has been for years. And so it's worth pressing the point that the Second Amendment does not guarantee you the right to own a gun. So the amendments being listed here, the title itself is not only a threat, but a lie. The First Amendment, in black and white prose, guarantees you the right to free speech. The Second Amendment does not guarantee you the right to a gun, much less the right to kill people who say that you can't have a gun, which is what this title says. We shall see, though. You can't pick them. I can't pick them. I'm going to read it. And this next one is by Alexander Larman. He's a Windsor writer. He writes on the Royal House of Windsor. Almost never does work that I like. Almost never. He did a book called The Windsors of War that I thought was facile, almost to the point of complicity. And he seems to be writing for a certain audience. I'll give him that. He seems to know the audience that he wants to write to. And it's not the people who want intelligent commentary on this legitimately fascinating subject. The House of Windsor is legitimately fascinating. And this is his new one, Power and Glory, Elizabeth II and the Rebirth of Royalty. And I don't, right away, even at the beginning, I don't know what that means. Elizabeth had no power. The whole point of the Windsor reorganization in the wake of World War I was that it also had no glory, except on official state occasions, they were just ordinary people. It was wisely seen by George V, one of the only wise things he ever had, and what he ever laid claim to in his life, that if we don't do that, if we do the ostrich plume bit, then we could be killed, same as our cousins were. So Power and Glory, it's the absolute worst title that you could give if you're trying to do intelligent analysis of how Elizabeth II rebuilt the royalty. We will see. Every once in a while, this author will give me a chapter or a part of a chapter that I like, and I'm not going to miss a major release on the House of Windsor anyway. So then we have something that I'm far from the only person who's looking forward to this. This is by Amor Towles, an author that I like more the more I read and also reread him. I recently reread A Gentleman in Moscow and liked it a lot more than I liked it the first time. And this is Table for Two, where he returns to the world of the rules of civility for a couple of these stories, for a couple of these characters. It wouldn't matter to me if he returned to Narnia. I love this author, so this is going to be tremendous fun to go through. Then we have fantasy, modern fantasy. This is very, very perilous, of course. Those of you who read modern fantasy and have not so-called drunk the Kool-Aid will know how perilous this is. Modern fantasy is entirely the product of book talk. It's entirely identity politics, entirely ideologically captured. This will probably be the same thing. I'm going to do it anyway. It's from a major house. I'm going to give it a try. It's called To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods, and it's by Molly Silang. Very stylish cover there. If I remember correctly, the basic plot line here is that the main character, a girl boss who don't need no man, has the ability literally to kill people just by wanting to, but is being coerced. Despite that ability, of course, should make her completely unbeatable, and it does. But she's being, if I remember correctly, the plot, she's being coerced because her loved ones are in danger if she doesn't do what she's told. And there follow supernatural high fantasy shenanigans that I'm walking into trouble here, and I know that. I know what this will be. And unless it utterly surprises me, I know what this will be. It will be all the things that it's required to be these days. It's not even a question of options. It's required to be these things. The main female character in this book, the one who can kill people just by thinking about it, will be lesbian. She will not be heterosexual. She will have one male friend, but he will be utterly gormless. He will be completely ineffectual. He will need to be saved and also told what to think. And it's pretty easy to guess who the bad guys will be. Not their identity, but certainly their sex and their skin color. It's like this program that you have to do and you can't do anything else. Maybe this author will surprise me by giving me characters who do what they're doing for character reasons, not necessarily because Twitter wants them to do that. I'm going to give it a try. I don't want to miss a major fantasy release. I'm old enough to remember, as the noxious talking heads phrase goes on cable news. I'm old enough to remember when mainstream fantasy did not get treated this way. So To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods would come out as a mass market paperback, a few thousand copies, be distributed in drugstores and maybe the back alley of a bookstore every here and there. It would never be in hardcover. And that'd be that. It'd be gone the next month. The cover would be torn off and the thing would be returned and pulped. So for them to get a big rollout and make a big payday for their author, that's wonderful. I look at that and I think on some levels that's a dream come true. That's what we all dreamed about. And it could be good. We shall see. I'm not holding out much hope, but then again, I'm a critic. I'm not holding out much hope for any of these things. So even the Salman Rushdie book, I mean, he's 1 for 1 when it comes to turning a traumatic personal event into a really good book. He's 1 for 1 doing that. But this could be just self-pity. Or who knows? We shall see. And then we'll finish up with, we did fantasy, we'll now do new science fiction. And I say that I don't have high hopes for any of these things, but if the more you prove yourself, the more credit you have in the bank of Steve. J.R. Ward, I know what I'm getting with a Black Dagger Brotherhood book. Some of them aren't as good as others, but I know that it'll cover some of the basics. I know that. Unless it's a drastic drop-off, in which case I won't be the only person who notices it. And the same thing is true with this last one. This is a series that I really like. It's extremely predictable. The author tends not to let bad or half-baked work get into the public. It's the Honor Harrington series by David Weber. And this is a new one, Toll of Honor. If I remember correctly from the plot synopsis of this one, it's not going to do a good job of orienting you if you haven't read the last 4 books, at least. But I have, so I'll need to brush up on them. I'll need this book to remind me a bit. But the Honor Harrington books are very much worth reading. I would suggest you start at the beginning, and it's a long list of books. Some of them more standalone than others. The publisher is saying that this will work as a standalone Honor Harrington novel. I find that hard to believe. I have not noticed that recapping ability as a strength of this author. But I can hope. I certainly hope that it will be. I don't need it to be that, but I'm always hoping that this... Honor Harrington has such a built-in fan base for David Weber that he, like most other science fiction or fantasy authors, is not rolling in dough. They're not all the fourth wing. You're making enough money to keep, to cover your mortgage, but you're not going to turn down a fan favorite. You're not going to turn down sales. And an Honor Harrington book will sell to the legions of people who already read this series. Okay, that's fine. And I'm not begrudging an author that. But you start to feel if you're an author in a situation like that, you start to feel a good deal of momentum. And that will work against you grounding the book for genuinely first-time new readers. We'll see if that actually happens. I hope that it does. I'm going to love it either way. But anyway, there you go. That is a very preliminary April TBR. We're going to do a few more April new release books, videos, as long as the cool kids are coming out with April reading videos. I need to do a couple more new release, look over a few more new releases for April, whether I've read them or not. And also a legitimate personal April TBR of the non-new releases that I'm going to be reading. The stuff that's going to be generated by BookTube. I need to do that, so we have a bunch of these videos to do, but this is enough for today. So I'll wrap this up for now, and I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.